Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this roundtable discussion, this African spirituality roundtable on our authentic African spiritual traditions. Today, we are so blessed and I'm so grateful to have practitioners of Kemetic spirituality, of Haitian Vodou, of Ifa, Obeah, Palo, Lucumi, Odinani, and Zulu spirituality. But first, if you are new here, my name is Sasha, and on this channel, we talk about African spirituality, decolonization, and manifestation. Before we begin this roundtable discussion, I just want us to take a moment to honor our ancestors, the ones who walked before us, the ones who carried these traditions so we can be even able to sit here today and discuss those. So let's just take a deep breath together and I will allow BaNAuset to begin.
Zuan. Let's everyone take a nice deep inhalation through the nose and exhale. Anashherak nebet Anuk nebet Anashherak happy Anuk happy Duaunter Anashherak serket Anuk serket Anashherak kepsenuf Anuk kepsenuf Duaunter Anashherak aset Anuk aset Anashherak amset Anuk amset Duaunter Anashherak nit Anuk nit Anashherak duamotef Anuk duamotef Duaunter Anashherak nut Anuk nut Anashherak geb Anuk geb Duaunter Anashherak shu Anuk shu Anashherak tefnut Anuk tefnut Duaunter Anashherak pautnachu Anuk pautnachu Anashherak imbunachu Anuk imbunachu Duaunter Divine Mother, Father, Creator, known to us by many names, we give thanks for your love, for your guidance, for your protection. We give thanks to the great African spirits of nature, known to us by many names. The Necheru, the Lua, the Orisha, the Aboson, the Mpongo. We give thanks to the four directions and the elements of air, fire, water, earth, and ether. Thank you to the animal domain, the plant and the mineral domain that sustain. Thank you to our ancestors, our spirit guides, our angels, and all of the light beings that surround us with protection. We honor our collective African family who lost their lives to colonization and enslavement, and to those of us who are still not free today. We give thanks to our benevolent ancestors, known and unknown, who came together to create the DNA that caused us to exist. We call upon all of you to give us the foresight so that we may see, so that we may hear, so that we may know, so that we may do, and so that we may be as we were created to be. We call the names of our great African ancestors who made monumental contributions towards our liberation. We offer you this drink. Baba Heru Angra Sepata Samaj, Ashe. Asata Shakur, Ashe. Malcolm X, Ashe. Ya Asante Wa, Ashe. Thomas Sankara, Ashe. Kofi Annan, Ashe. Patrice Lumumba, Ashe. Ida B. Wells, Ashe. Shaka Zulu, Ashe. Marian Anderson, Ashe. Sheikh Anta Diop, Ashe. Rosa Parks, Ashe. Queen Nzinga, Ashe. Nanny of the Maroons, Ashe. Imhotep, Ashe. Menchu Hotep, Ashe. Haile Selassie, Ashe. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Ashe. At this time, I invite you all to call out the names of your personal benevolent ancestors as I pour libation. Dar Thompson, Ashe. Aunt Beck, Ashe. Neville Thompson, Ashe. Dorothy Matthews, Ashe. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. I turn it back over to you, Sasha.
Thank you so much, BaNausset. That was beautiful. So, so powerful. So powerful. Thank you so much. All right. So let's begin. I want us to start with some introductions. And I would love for each of you to actually introduce yourselves, just because you know yourselves better than anyone else could ever know you. So I would love for you to share your names, share the tradition that you walk with, the spiritual practice, and then maybe you could also say where you currently are too, because I know we're all in different places. And then you can also say what pulled you towards the path that you're on now. So I will also put that in the chat. Those were a lot of words, but maybe we can start actually with BaNausset and then we can go around from there.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. My name is BaNausset. I am a nurse and I'm also an energy healer. I am a holistic health practitioner specializing in African holistic health. What drew me to the work that I'm doing now is first my own personal struggles in health and wellness, and also working with my community, seeing their frustrations and always having the heart of being a humanitarian and wanting to help them, and knowing that I couldn't with the information I had from the Western sick care system. So I had to learn, and that led me divinely to the Kemetic spiritual system, to my first teacher who taught me that your healing is in your culture. And that is our motto at Kemetic Wellness.
Thank you so much for sharing. Welcome. All right. How about we move next to African Crystal Goddess?
Yes, I am Yayi Nkisi Malongo. I am a Palo priestess. I operate my own apothecary online, African Crystal Goddess Apothecary. I got into this work really, really young. Didn't call it what anyone calls it right now. Like when people will say hoodoo, voodoo, root work, conjure, we didn't call it that. That wasn't what it was. It was just my grandmother saying, go get something off the side of the house. And that was the end of the conversation. I went and got it. So I've been doing this a very long time. And over time, I think it just evolved and took on its own experience. And while it was becoming its own experience, I was deciding if I wanted to have the experience. So that's how I ended up even coming across Palo and Lucumi.
Very nice. Thank you, Yayi. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on to Noentla.
Hello everyone, Khumalo. My name is Noentla. I am a Nkisi, which is a diviner herbalist in South Africa. In South Africa, we call it a calling. It is, I guess we all call it a calling. But we go through, I went through like genuine initiation, having a teacher. I was initiation, like I'd say 3-4 years, but with my teacher about 7 years. So rest in peace. He passed away in 2021. But he really helped me see my light, because the reason I got onto this path is because I was sitting in darkness, immense suffering from just my personal life, trauma and struggles. So I got into this path, and thank God that we have African spirituality. I also got into it before, even in South Africa, like it was on the forefront. So I'm here to learn. I'm really excited to be here. Makosi.
Yes, Makosi. Thank you so much, Noentla. And let's move on to Juno.
Okay, good day. I am located in the Bahamas and I practice Lucumi Ifa. It's been a practice that I've been exploring since I think around 2020, and it's been I guess a pretty interesting experience, learning, I guess, the similarities in different like ETR practices, learning more about how they're all connected, even, So it's been a beautiful journey, learning and meeting different people of different paths, and I am very open towards learning about them all, just from a theology perspective. So yes, happy to be here.
So happy to have you, Juno. Thank you. And then let's move on to Love.
Hi, I'm Love Hannington. I practice Obeah, and it's a bit of a long story how I got around to it, so I'll shorten it. I was always really interested. I was always sort of like pulling together spiritual bars, herbal bars, or pulling together herbs at home as a child. And my mother, she's Antiguan, so she automatically like, we're not doing that. There are witches in the family. Your dad's people are witches. You're not doing that in this house. So it's something that I kind of ignored for years until I got really sick with endometriosis, PCOS, and adenomyosis. And as I'm so sorry, my cats have come into the room. I can just hear them in the background, so I hope you can hear me. I'll come closer. So as I started, as I started to try and find ways to heal that, I started coming back round to these practices and realized that my people are very linked to Obeah. My father's side of the family have the Maroon links through the Trelawney, the Cudjoe tribe. And I reached out to someone who's actually here in the UK. I'm in London. And I went through my initiation to reconnect with those ancestors, to reconnect with those Obeah practitioners. And I guess it skips generations, but it's come back to me.
so sorry. I don't know what it is. I think it might be my Wi-Fi. If you could just repeat just the last little section of what you said, because it completely cut off. I'm sorry.
The last little section.
Yeah.
So healing the endometriosis, PCOS, came back to the practices, started reconnecting with my ancestors, and became very aware that the maroon side had the Obeah links. So I found someone to initiate me here in the UK. We became very good friends. I initiated, and I carried on with it ever since. And I'm in London.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you so much, love. And thank you for clarifying the pronunciation of Obeah. I've been saying Obey for a while.
I was saying Obeah for the longest time when I first came into the practice, and my mum was like, "What nonsense is this?" Obeah.
Obeah. Okay, I'm gonna remember that. Thank you. See, that's the purpose of this, right? We're learning. There's so many mistakes that we're gonna make, so I appreciate that. Okay, let's go to Data. Oh, Data, we cannot hear you. Is it just me, maybe? Yeah, no. No problem. Still mute. This is see why we're not live. This is the reason. No problem, Data. Maybe as you. Oh yes, we hear you.
I moved. I have a new tech setup, so everything is still wonky. Thank God we're not. Okay, Greetings, everyone. I'm Data Oruwari. I'm a visionary healer, a visual artist, mystic, and an intuitive channel. And the work that I do bridges African ancestral wisdom with contemporary expression. I was originally born and raised in Nigeria, but I'm based now in the United States in Virginia. And I draw from my lineage on my mother's side as a practitioner of something called Odinani, a tradition called Odinani. And this is spirituality from the Igbo people of West Africa. And basically through my practice, what I do is I explore the intersections of art, ritual, and ancestral knowledge as a pathway for healing, remembrance, and for illumination. How I came on this journey was just about 12 years ago, me coming into a realization that the reality we have today really isn't what it was taught to be. And this is because certain gifts started to open up for me as an empath and as a channel. And so it made me go down this rabbit hole of seeking truth. And that was how, as the journey goes, it's all over the place, but somehow you land where you're supposed to be. And it was with my tradition on my mother's side. Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Data. I'm very excited to also learn a lot about that Odinani, because we do hear a lot about, Yoruba spirituality, yes. But when it comes to Igbo, I would say it's quite forgotten or not as widespread or talked about. So yeah. That's really good.
What's interesting is I think, Love, you mentioned you practice Obeah, and Obeah actually has a connection to Odinani as well.
In fact, Odinani is a part. There are parts of it in it.
Yeah, because the healers are called Dibias, so Dibia is Obeah. So yeah, fun fact.
Oh, that's so cool. So cool. Thank you, Data. All right. Ola. Ola, are you here?
Greetings, everyone. Alafia. Yes, I'm here. You all are just so amazing. Hearing you all is just making me smile and feel so much joy to be in your presence. I'm Olatokunboh, Obasi, and I'm a practitioner of Ifa. This is for me through lineage. I'm actually also Kenyan, and so Sasha and I had a little conversation because we have the same last Kenyan name by surprise. And so I'm in Kenya, right? from my maternal side, but my father is a Yoruba man from northern Yoruba. And I've lived in Puerto Rico. I've lived in the US. I just moved from Puerto Rico back to Kenya. So I have been a practitioner of Ifa for 15 years. I got my initiation in BaNAuset and called to Ifa through my father's lineage. You know, his generation would be the one that would know about the mysteries or the culture, but would be the generation that also would lose it because of education and colonization. So I am one of the children that went back home and to honor this tradition, the tradition of Ifa. So it's an ancestral choice that I walk this path. I'm a birth worker. I am a herbalist, clinical herbalist. Actually, I'm a functional medicine practitioner, creative, and also I own a school called Well of Indigenous Wisdom School. So I teach people herbal medicine and healing arts. So again, it's wonderful to be around you all, beautiful people.
Asante sana, Ola. And yeah, that's another fun fact. We might be cousins. So we're still exploring. I'm talking to my parents right now to figure out, because we have the last, or from your mother's side, we have the same last name as you said. Still some exploration to be done, but thank you so much.
Your father wrote a really nice book about the people of the Luya people of my mother, so it's nice to see his child.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll also put the link to my dad's book below too. It's really good to explore, other East African tribes and ethnic groups. Thank you. All right, and let's move on. Last but not least, Fenyx.
Hello, everyone. So I am Fenyx, but I was born Fransgael Prophet. The story of how I came into this work or into this practice is long, like everyone's here, because when you have this kind of calling, it's a winding path. You find yourself not walking in a straight line. And so my story has a lot of that in it as well. But I was born in Haiti. I was born in Haiti after Duvalier. And my whole life has really been a story of, I don't know how I got here. And somehow I'm thriving and I'm still well. And that's been my entire life journey. And so even my initiation story, or how I found this path, honestly, it reads more like a thriller than it reads like something I would have expected it to be. But I think that's just Spirit's way of showing us that wherever we are, whoever we are, Spirit will meet us as we are. And so my parents were decidedly not religious or spiritual for that matter, but were hungry for progress and hungry for more. So by the time they had me, they made some different choices that put me in an American school system, even though I was in Haiti. I was raised with the values, confusing values of a Southern Baptist white missionary kid, but also with a strong Haitian Catholic, the Haitian Vodou side. On my father's side, which is also the more Protestant side, that's where the healing comes from. The physical healing, healing by touch, energy healing, laying of hands, all of the traditions that have to do with healing people, not with Western medicine, but with any of the modalities that are given to us. And in my family and in my many lineages, it has always had to do with the stars. So as soon as I began tracing my lineage back, I found myself in Timbuktu, I found myself in Mali, I found myself traveling the deserts, and knowledge of the stars came so easy to me. I honestly, it's only because I know and understand how Spirit works. and how the universe works and how it operates that I've come to believe that I am exactly who they said and declared to me that I was. But that journey, I will also say, has been a very sometimes isolated one or isolating one, because of the ways that coming to know and coming to accept who we are is always like it's a confrontation of what we were socialized to believe ourselves as. After the earthquake in Haiti that happened in 2010, life and luck would have had it that I was very open and not doing anything, just as the universe wanted it. And so I found myself in Haiti without clarity really what the experience was going to be about, but it was right after the earthquake and I just went because what else was I going to do? And yeah, that was the beginning of it for me. It was like one dream I had of my grandmother who died the year prior, who had never, while she had been alive, spoken to me about anything having to do with roots or spirits or any of those things. All I knew was similar to what I think African Crystal said, like, this was just stuff like my grandma said, go do it. You just went to go do it. Like, we didn't have to have special words for it. And so when she passed, I was sad because I couldn't make her funeral. And she was over 100. And I had a dream after I touched base back in Haiti. And the dream was inviting me to begin exploring my roots. And it scared me half to death. I was like, there's no way I'm going. I don't want any part of it, because up until that point, the best that I could expect of roots and ancestor veneration, ancestral healing, if I even knew anything along those lines at that point, was that nothing good ever happens to people who follow that path. They always end up really, really messed up sort of circumstances. They always end up having to make really ugly contracts with evil entities and all of this stuff. And so even though I had always loved my culture, I think the esoteric parts of our spirituality, the parts having to do with priesthood, the parts having to do with cultural identity, like everybody else, even though I grew up there, I didn't want anything to do with it until it was like, it was either this or I die. And it was like, okay, then this is it. And even the feeling when as I'm talking about it, I know it's a safe space. It wasn't death in the sense of I didn't want it. It was more like nothing else matters. Nothing else matters but understanding the truth of who I am. Nothing else matters but following the truth of who I am. And almost to the exclusion of everything else, for about 13, 14 years of my life, there was nothing else. I woke, I lived, I breathed. It was spirit. I needed to understand the mysteries. And I think someone else on the panel mentioned it. One of the really cool things about the Ginen tradition in Haitian Vodou is that you learn the mysteries in a very practical way. Not just from I'm a root worker perspective, but like I need to understand karma. I need to understand justice. I need to understand, the interconnectedness of all of us, and not work as an agent of chaos against that order, but work as a restorer of balance within that. And for me, the coolness of it is that I use astrology to do that. I use alchemy to do that. I use quantum physics to do that. I use metaphysics to do it. I'm big on like new science stuff. So big on affirmations, big on mind training. I lived in Asia. I've been all around Europe. So I'm very comfortable with gypsy magic, Celtic magic, a lot of white magic, to be quite honest with you, I'm quite comfortable with, which scares a lot of white people because I'm Haitian. And so when I meet people who are comfortable with Black people who aren't comfortable with their magic, I usually scare them, because there's nothing about me that's ashamed of the power that comes from being aligned and in harmony with my ancestors and walking in that power. So it's a joy for me to be here. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Merci ampil. Fenyx, merci ampil. I definitely relate so much, about the death, the rebirth kind of thing, right? Like you're pushed to a corner, there's no other choice. And I have so much respect for Haiti. My husband is Haitian, by the way, another fun fact. So that's something that I'm like, I feel the blood. I definitely feel the blood running through my veins as well. So much respect Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for this beautiful introduction. So let's get into the questions. I did tell a few of you, but just for time, right? I don't want to keep you too long. I know, we like to talk and these are topics we're so interested in, but I know it's late, right? I don't want to keep you too long. So if I see time kind of losing us, I may have to skip one or two questions. So that's gonna be how we'll do it this time, okay? And feel free, like I will throw a question out there, feel free to answer in your own way, and you can kind of cross-examine each other as well if you want to. You don't even have to mind me. Basically, I'm not even here. I'm just literally listening and learning from all of you. So let's start with our first question. What does your tradition teach about the ancestors, and how do the ancestors in your tradition guide us today? I've also put the question in the group chat. Whoever wants to start, you can begin.
I'll start only because I think I have an answer that's slightly different. There's what on paper my tradition, Haitian Vodou, teaches about ancestors, and then there's what happens in practice. And I'm an initiate of the Ginen tradition in Haitian Vodou, so it's like the mystical path. It's the shaman's path within Haitian Vodou, which is a little bit different than the path of a Ungan or a Mambo. So for me, ancestors are everything. In the Ginen tradition, everything is energy. Everything is energy. Your thoughts are energy. Circumstances are energy. There's no such thing as coincidence. Everything, if you take the time to understand it, you can understand what it means and what it is. So thus, your ancestors are the bedrock of your connection into the unseen worlds, into the invisible worlds. They're your most direct conduit. But what I can say is that in popular Haitian culture, or even in, I would say, contemporary Haitian thought, while we understand the importance of our ancestors, our direct ancestors, I think there is some confusion that has to do with sort of the practical, everyday lived experience. For many families where their lineage has not been ruptured, they very much have a very strong ancestral practice. Like you walk into the home, you'll see pictures of grandma, great grandpa, and like in those homes and in those families, nothing is broken and everything is there. But when you have so much of my Haitian brothers and sisters, myself included, who have such a history of rupture, migration, just all kinds of displacement, familial displacement is quite common. And as a result of that, for those people, they often find them, you will hear it where they are more likely to rely on a loi than their own ancestors. They're more likely to know how to make an offering to this loi, but have no idea who their great grandmother on their dad's side is. As a shaman, for me, that's deeply problematic, but it's common. And it's commonplace for Ungan and Mambo and practitioners of the Vodou tradition to run across people and then sort of kind of like, use a Western diagnostic sort of approach and say, okay, you have this problem, we're going to do this. Whereas I would say if you had a true appreciation and veneration for ancestors, you would probably start there. Not just in a ritualistic way, but in a let's figure out where these pieces, how we can sort of bring those threads together. And I think that's when it becomes more than just dogma and theory that we're talking about. But for me, at least, it's a lived practice, right? It's an embodied state.
Wow, that's a really good point. So you're basically saying that in terms of deities, it's more common practice to have a higher respect or put them on a higher pedestal compared to ancestors. And for you, you believe that is wrong, or it's not the best way to go about it. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to say something.
I was, and then I realized you had paused. So I would say I certainly don't think it's the best way to go about it. But I would also say, too, studying different traditions from around the globe all of them start with ancestors. It's really a perversion of our indigenous practices to make us think that it starts anywhere else but in our lineage, but from within us. And I say this not because Haitian Vodou seeks to teach something else, it's because of our colonial history and the ways in which we're undoing and unlearning. I think that's why that confusion still exists in my own homeland. But I'm optimistic, though, that there are lots of people like me who have been curious about the mysteries, but deeply so in a way that's helping us do work to restore back the balance, and some of what is lost when these things are misunderstood or misaligned.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gina. And yes, Noentla. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. That was so lovely. I think as we go further in this conversation, I think we'll all realize that there is such a common thread. Like what I'm seeing myself nodding the entire time because there's such like deep resonance to everything that's being said. I think for us, you know, in South Africa, there's, you know, the African spirituality community is so vast, actually, and I'm hearing so is it as everywhere else. And I just want to reiterate what you were saying. I have absolutely nothing new to add because you had like every point was made that we start with the ancestors, and I just wanted to say that we start with the ancestors and then deities and then source God, and then because our ancestors are the connector to source, so it is important to start with the people that know you, that have your blood, you have their blood running through them, and they are the connector to whatever you believe in, angels, you know, religion. Because in South Africa also religion is sometimes mixed with African spirituality, that you could be Buddhist, you could be Christian, but and still practice your indigenous practices. So your ancestors are the ones that will carry the messages forward, and thus bringing the messages back down to you. So yeah, that just was my little addition.
And to your point, Noentla, thank you. That's really good. And to your point as well, I've also seen that, right? There would be Muslim, there would be Christian, whatever. Like they practice like an Abrahamic religion, but then they would also practice, right, an indigenous African tradition as well. But one thing I've noticed in prevalence is that they would practice the indigenous spirituality for kind of like a dire motive. I've noticed that some people, if they, you know, want riches or they want something, you know, they're Christian, but they'd go to see the woman in the village who, you know, has powers to, you know, get you money or get you a husband, wife, and so on. What's your feeling about that? Because I've seen that quite a lot in Kenya too.
Yeah, no, that I'm not averse. I'm not about that. I think it's important that we remember that this isn't something that we go to that is just for games. It is a way of life. It's a state of being. And your ancestors aren't your slaves, you know. And I think like that's just one of the things. And we also we then take deities, we make pacts with them and make deities our slaves. So I think it's important to know that African spirituality is about your state of being, your way of life. It is an integrated practice in how you live your everyday life. It's not just something you do maybe on a weekend, or it's about, and you know, before, because I had the privilege of leaving the city to go initiate in the rural villages, and I learned there that actually the knowledge that we have about our medicines, it's everyone's knowledge. It's not just, you know, for the shamans or the healers. Like the girls in the village will go with a new trainee and teach them about the way of, the Sangomas. You're not just learning from the Sangomas themselves, you're also learning from the community. So I think we need to go back to understanding that it's not, it's not just a way of getting riches or, getting a husband or a wife or, progressing life. It's where you go for your integral life progress.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Noentla. All right, let's go to BaNAuset. I see your hand is up first, Q. Go ahead.
Okay. So I don't know if I stated well earlier that I am a practitioner of the Kemetic tradition. So in the Kemetic tradition, it's I know this is very similar across the board with all of the different African traditional religions. For us, we are taught that the ancestors it's a continuation of life. So for us, life and death are part of one whole cycle. Death is just another experience in the cycle of life. And we continue our work, we continue our journey after we transition into the ancestral realm, which is why we are taught that the way we live our lives is important. We're taught about living our lives in Ma'at, which is our principle of truth and balance and harmony. And the ancestors really serve as a guide for us. That's one of the reasons that I've noticed that some of us have a lot of trouble because we may have ancestors who didn't live right, who didn't gain certain amounts of knowledge. And so we are thirsty. We don't have the guidance that we need. Everyone has at least one spirit guide, but the stronger your ancestors are, the more you can go forward. And so we're always building on what they have done. That's one of the ways that we honor our ancestors. We speak their names. We also continue their great works. And we also have to correct their mistakes. That's a part of our work here. We have to correct their mistakes. So that's a big thing that I do in my work as well with generational healing. It's seeing the things that made our lives so difficult, so hard, in part because of the mistakes that some of our ancestors made or the things that they did not learn. And it's up to us to correct it so that our descendants have a more fruitful life.
Right. Wow, that's such a good point. And then how about this? I keep having questions just pop up in my mind. BaNausset said, what if someone says, my family line, there were evil people, they did bad things, right? They committed terrible things on earth, they were not living in Ma'at. It's not my responsibility to correct their wrongs. This life is mine, right? That was theirs. I'm a good person on earth. How would you go about answering that question? Because that's something I've heard many times before. People have even asked me, and it's kind of a harder question to answer.
Well, there's a saying that the sins of the father shall be visited upon the sons. And a lot of us do pay for the sins of our ancestors by how hard our life is. And even by living a good life and being a good person in contradiction to negative things that the ancestors have done, you are healing your ancestors. You are.
Yes.
And you're making those things right. I know from experience, there's certain things, when you come into this world and your life is heavy as a child, that's not your stuff. That is not your stuff. You're carrying things, decisions that people in the past have made. And so whether you like it or not, you're going to have to correct it, or you're going to be experiencing a lot of turmoil in your life. It's not something that you really have a choice about.
Yeah. Wow, that is deep, and that's the whole point. That's why family is so important in African culture, right? Family is so important. What your family does, whether here on Earth, whether you were here on Earth at the time or not, affects you, whether you like it or not. Your descendants are either benefiting or not from the behaviors that you are executing on Earth. Wow, thank you. Okay, let's go to the next. So data.
Yes. So I think what Odinani has taught me about the concept of ancestors is that they're basically those who have come before us, right? And if you trace your ancestry, we believe that ancestors are actually your direct connection to the creator, because there's somebody who came before you, before them, and it goes all the way back to, dare I say, millions of years ago. And each of us right now has access to at least 14,000 ancestors that came before us in this generation, right? So imagine the amount of memory and wisdom that can come from that, right? We believe too that when we die, though we lose our physical vessel, which is our body goes back to the earth, but our essence lives on, and that essence carries that memory, right? So for us, we have two major types of ancestors. You have your blood lineage ancestors, right? And then you have what we call the elemental ancestors. So your lineage ancestors, we call them the first group is your umunna and your umunni, which is basically your father's bloodline and your mother's bloodline, like a tree branch going all the way back through time. You also have your indiche, and your indiche are the ancestors who lived well. They lived a harmonious life. They were known to be ascended masters or elevated ones. They're the ones who the community buried them well because they recognize that they contributed significantly, right? So your indiche are somewhat I think, like somebody mentioned in the beginning, like we go to certain ancestors before we go to the deities, right? So your indici are the ones that you go to, they're like your first line of defense, basically, right? Now, for your elemental ancestors, we think of the fact that we're all made of the element, water, fire, earth, air. They've been here before us, right? And so we acknowledge the ancestors of the elemental forces too as part of us. We're made of what, 80% water? Water is one of our oldest ancestors. We've had rivers, and all of that. So how they ultimately guide us is that they're all here to be advisors, to help us understand who we are and also help us fulfill our purpose here in this lifetime. That is the reason there are guides, right? For example, with your umunna and your umunni, which is your blood lineage ancestors, they're the ones who lived a human life. So when you're like, oh, I don't have money, how do I take care of the kids? How do I learn this? They understand what it is to have a human experience, and they can be there to support you very practically, right? Whereas with your indice, they believe that indice are more, not far removed, but they're ascended to a place where they have more work to do. And so they can't really be there every day. However, your indice are the best to go to for the type of work that I do with clients is like shadow work, healing trauma in the bloodline. The indice, because they're well and they're healed, they know how to help you navigate that experience. We hear of epigenetics today where trauma is being passed down in the bloodline. So your indice are the ones who can really help you with that ancestral work, right? So that's how we understand ancestors.
Amazing, amazing. And then data. In terms of the indice, how can we determine if an ancestor was an indice? Because you did mention like they lived well and so on.
Yes.
Are there any other determining factors there?
One of the major determinants of that is just how they were buried. Were they buried by the community? There are certain rituals and traditions. The way an indice is buried is very different from how you bury the average person. So yeah, there's traditions and ways that they process, the way they pass on, and the community is the one who defines that. So if you go to a community and they've never heard of that person before, they're probably not an indice. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Powerful, powerful stuff. African crystal goddess, Yayi.
For me, I would say our tradition, I'm a Lucumi practitioner, not a priest. So I preface it with that. I'm a Palo priest and a root work practitioner. So I grew up with a Baptist household in a Catholic school. So when I think of ancestors and when ancestors are presented, the conversation is presented, it's always about who lived well and who died well. If you did not live well and you did not die well, then we are less likely inclined to give you light. And I'll give you an example of what that means. My biological father passed away in 2020. Me and him did not have a relationship, so it's not a relationship that I missed in the sense of we were not close. But when I was younger, he was not the best person. As he grew older, he was a person who ran from being a minister. If that gives you any indication of what he should have been doing and what he was punished for not doing, what he was having a hard time with. So when he passed, I was like, okay, I think we can fix it now, because everyone is saying you were a good person. So something changed. And we believe wholeheartedly that you don't necessarily, when you choose your life to come here, it may not be about me. Your only responsibility to me may be conception. And that's it. You may only be here just to make sure I get here, and then you disappear. So I wrote him a letter. And for 9 days, because when we give light for 9 days. And that's the process to elevate, what we call elevate that person to their next space. I was at the time in need of an initiation. And after the 9 days, maybe a month later, I got a call from an attorney out of nowhere, didn't know who it was. She just said, I just need your address. Your father's estate is dispersed. And I was like, my father's what? And it was exactly the amount, right down to the gas money that I needed to get there, get my initiation complete, and get back home. And I say that to say that elevating a person to their space where they can become an ancestor. In some cases, that is a difficult decision for some people. But if that person wasn't living well at the beginning, but at the end they lived well, they were well thought of, they have been well spoken of. I can't find a person to this moment that speaks ill of this man. I personally have nothing ill to say about him because he wasn't around. So I can't say anything ill about him as an ancestor. But what I can say is that in life, you were not present, but in death, you were. I can say that. And I can say that in such a beautiful way that it is healed in such a way that me and him have an amazing relationship while he's not physically here. My lineage itself, I practice because of an 8th great grandmother whose name I don't know. But she speaks often in dreams.
I had to pause. That's so powerful, so powerful. And it's kind of like, when in the Black community, there's so much of that, right? Absent fathers and so on. And it's interesting from that spiritual perspective how things can be repaired, and the whole concept of dying well, first of all, it is a concept, right? And dying well, you can actually provide assistance from beyond the grave in the different realm. there's just so much to wrap my head around. But I just have
Absolutely.
a question, just a question. Could you give like a very brief example of not dying well, let's say? So let's flip it. Let's flip the script.
So let's flip it.
Yeah.
A person who did not live well, say someone who abused their daughter,
Okay.
their son, someone who made it their business to make the people around them absolutely unhappy. They caused harm with intent. They did not live a justified or justifiable life. Their life was without honor. They made it their business to dishonor and harm people. Harm is something that we cannot just walk around actively causing. And I think that has been the problem when we think of ancestors who have died and moved on with their lives, in the sense of moving on, because we don't just because we disconnect from this frame, we do not disconnect from source. We are continuations. We're constant. So if you did not live well in this world, my daughter asked me something similar, and I said, I don't want to curse, but
Okay.
The asshole you were here is the same asshole you are there. And don't get me wrong, sometimes, let's be very clear, let's put it in perspective, sometimes you need hitters. When you need someone to protect you, when something is happening to you, and you need a frontline defense, sometimes you need the assholes. So don't throw them away. But the reality is the odds of you uplifting a rapist, a murderer, a person who has hurt children, that is literally almost zero. That is literally almost zero. Because what purpose they literally serve, they have served nothing but malevolence on this side of the world.
Right.
So why would you want to engage in that way? And again, I understand each to their own, but the odds of it happening for us, for me and mine, the odds of it happening are zero.
So it's like we shouldn't bother. We shouldn't waste our time to interact with those people.
Not necessarily a waste of your time. It truly is the end result of their behavior.
Okay.
It really has nothing to do with you per se. It has everything to do with the continuation of their behavior and what was completed here on this plane, and what you are choosing to move forward with in the next world. The odds are you're not changing unless you want to. If I can recall 3 of my lives in detail, 3 of them in great detail, 40 and 50 pages of just details of my life, then there's and I can tell you, yeah, I was a pretty good person, but I needed some work. These entities who do these things, yes, they need light. They do, and it's a choice. We're not saying you can't. We're saying the odds are you won't, and nobody's going to force you to. Now, what's the flip side of that? They become decrepit spirits.
Okay.
That's the flip side. They become decrepit spirits, and dead things don't usually stay dead. Dead things don't usually stay dead. So they become something else, and they tend to carry their malevolence forward unless they change it.
And I can imagine their energy must be very stubborn as well because of their perception.
For some of them, they are. And I've met people who elevated them and let them move forward. And some people who had to elevate them because they were creating havoc in their lives. Because again, we have to look at that. They're going to create problems if they created problems the entire span of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Yayi. That is insightful, really, really insightful. Just for time purposes, there's so many questions I could ask, so many, but for time purposes, let's go to next in line. Olatokunboh.
Oh, well, everything I'm hearing segues, converges, right? We are all African at the end of it, the foundation of it all. And that's who we are, whether we call it African or whatever we called ourselves, and from lands that we are from across the globe. I'm thinking from the Yoruba about your question, Sasha, and very similar teachings as what I've heard so far. The Yoruba tradition teaches about ancestors in two ways. You know, you can go from a more metaphysical context to a more focused in context. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what has been said because there are all truths that are included in the Yoruba tradition. The one thing that I did want to that the tradition or our tradition as in Yoruba, or I would say Ifa, let's say Ifa, that the Yoruba people practice. We must remember community and celebration, which actually is interesting because, by the way, throughout my maternal side, which is your lineage as well, Sasha, for instance, a funeral or burial rites here in the Obeah tradition, it's a big celebration. It's a time to celebrate the life of that individual, and there are days to mourn. There's a mission to grieve and to labor with the journey of that individual into the afterlife. And so those are the burial rites I feel I'm hearing when you know, some others have discussed about, you know, how that individual was believed and how they were celebrated. But however, most people, and they're, yes, horrible, malevolent beings, have go through these burials. At least that was the foundation of how our ancestors were observing life and the preciousness of life, right? So that community celebration, the community honor, and converging the worlds of spirit and human. That's why the community would honor these burial rites, so that the walk in the journey in the afterlife would be easier for the individual, but also and enlightening, and also for the community. Now, there are ancestors that come back to disturb and agitate and walk in the other realm and enter into a dream time realm. And they come through the animal spirit. Sometimes in Yoruba tradition, we do see that, and we know that there are orishas when they are coming through specific animals. So we interpret dreams depending on what is in the interaction is in that world. And therefore, with that messaging, we may need to make an ebo or an offering to appease that energy or the needs of that energy as we journey in the afterlife, so that ancestor. So I'll give you an example. There's a couple of things here. First of all, in my family, my father's side, my paternal side, we have what's called an oriki, which is a praise for our family. So you have different kinds of praises. And this is passed down through generations, and mine is actually towards a great magical charmer, was a hunter and a herbalist. And when we enter into our compound, when I meet my, let's say, my teacher or my elders in my community, we will say this oriki together to remind ourselves of who we are, this praise connected to this ancestor, because this ancestor was venerated. And I think some people have said, like, there's specific ancestors who have walked a lineage that have served the community, that have served in a big way. And he definitely did. So we keep those orikis, we keep those praises, and we sing them repeatedly. We chant a lot, like mantra chanting, to call in that ancestor to walk with us and to guide us. And it, in a way, it also reminds us of who we are and the power that we walk with, and not to forget that, and to teach that to our children. In Yoruba, Ifa tradition, we teach our children chants, prayers, odus, praises, poems very, very early. So oriki is really important as a lineage passing down, as a chant that is passed down in the family ancestrally through lineage. And then also making God ebo, you know, there's disturbance of spirit, then we make the offerings that are my head are recipes. That are recipes to make for different orishas. And the one that stands at the forefront of our petitioning, when we do have an ajogun, you know, a spirit that is not good, that is not working well for us, whether it's an ancestral spirit, which they're all our ancestors, we have to call on to Eshu. And so Eshu always makes the negotiations for us to appease to that energy. So that is a resolution. So when you ask about what do the traditions teach us about ancestors and how ancestors guide us today, first of all, tradition teaches us that we have all kinds of ancestors, the good, bad, ugly, and that there are resolutions to. But we also celebrate our ancestors to the egungun, like masquerade, for instance, with music, color, food, celebration. And some of that is communal, so it's overarching, and some of that is family, which we do also daily in on Oriki. And so yes, there's a lot to say there, but that's I touched on some perspective through the Ifa tradition.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ola. That's really interesting. And, you know, to your point about the burial rites and how funerals operate, I remember my very first trip to Kenya. I was so young, but I remember being so shocked at how they were celebrating the death of my mother's grandma. They were wearing white, they were dancing, they were smiling, they were drinking, like people were celebrating. And I was shocked because, you know, growing up in the West, I was like, oh, I thought funerals were supposed to be black clothes, crying, sad music, and so on. So, you know, it's really a celebration, you know, of those, you know, who lived well and maybe lived long life and other factors. So, great. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. We need to remember that in our dispensation that we're living in with these colonial constructs that we have entered into, what by willingly or not. Yeah, we need to come back to that celebration of life for those who deserve it. We can work on behalf of us too. They walk with us. And it is an honor. And I know that there are other indigenous cultures around the world, like in Mexico, for instance, that have the Day of the Dead and they make their celebrations intentionally. We do as well, like the Egungun festival. But then again, you know, we have to negotiate life and negotiate our purpose. We have a bloodline within us that has a murderer. We have also appeasements that we can make. Maybe the recipe might be intensive, but that's what we want to do. And I think some people have mentioned we might inherit that labor because that ancestor didn't do their work. But we do have orishas for that reason. So
That's so interesting. So that's what the Orishas are for. That's the operation. And then something very quickly from Yayi. You said, in our traditions, black only came into play when Queen Victoria mandated black to be the color for funerals. Interesting. I didn't know that, Yayi. That's so interesting. Wow. So now that's a tradition that's taken over. Oh, yeah. Okay.
And the tradition that doesn't have proper mourning, right? It's not even stoic. It's black and just dull. Our traditions, Africans, are colorful even in burial rites, right? And aromatic and full of specific dances and food for a mourning rite. That missing. This is why people are carrying grief and skeletons on their ankles for years, because those things haven't been done. So yeah, we're all blessed to at least know this and to teach our community how to grieve well.
Yes, that's true. Grief is a process. Grief really is a process. Grief is supposed to be a community initiative as well. And I know there's some places in basically all over the continent and diaspora where, they have professional grievers. They come with you, they cry out loud. They do all of these traditions just to ensure the family that you're not alone in your grief. This was a person of community, and we are all feeling the loss from this realm. Yeah. Okay, let's quickly go to love.
Okay, so there's automatically so many similarities. So I'll just point to a couple of them, probably discuss them in a bit more detail. So we do 9 nights. I think that can be quite a Caribbean thing, but it's specifically done in Obeah. So after you've passed on, you're supposed to mark it for 9 nights, and that's supposed to be somewhat of it's not meant to be this solemn affair. It's obviously people are going to be sad, but it's not meant to be this really they're still alive in your mind's eye, right? I guess going on to my story around that, when my grandmother had passed away at the end of last year, she was 98, and I had said to my mother, who is quite Christian, do you want to do a night? And she, even though she's quite Christian, she quite liked the idea of the pomp for her mother. So she wasn't going to say no to that. So we had caterers over, people bringing food, that kind of thing for the 9 nights, and the house was open the whole time. And I felt that I specifically needed to do this for my grandmother, and not because I had a special warm place in my heart for her, but because she was actually quite a bad person in her lifetime. So I already knew that going over, she's going to have some troubles going over. So it was so important that at least, I'm getting chills with this. Even when she was physically passing in hospital, it was my mother and myself there, and we were assisting that essentially labor process.
Okay.
So it was important for me that I was there, knowing who she was in her lifetime, knowing that we at least needed to give her a decent crossing to give some fighting chance for, I don't have children yet, but I have a lineage to think about. So doing that, saying her prayers to her as she passed, doing the 9 nights, that was really important for me. And a lot of that is stemming from the Obeah. Because Obeah, and I want to speak specifically about Caribbean Obeah, because we have Obeah that is still in Ghana, the Obeah that moved to the Caribbean via the slave trade, and therefore had to take on a different form of survival in that environment. So that is a practice that worked heavily with the poisons, with abortifacients, to make slavery very unprofitable. When you're doing such heavy and dark work, when you are taking the lives of slave traders, whether they deserve it or not, you're still taking a life, whether or not it would be the best for a mother to have an abortion instead of a child in slavery. You're still working with heavy energy. With that said, you have to learn how to work with these malevolent ancestors, because that is the energy that you need to understand in order to be working with such heavy energy. So in Obeah, it is in your initiation, you are really taught how to work with this energy. You are taught how to work with spirits as protection as you're working with these malevolent ancestors. So you're not just jumping into the deep end. It's kind of like, I'm going to try and not swear. I'm British. We swear in every other sentence. But
I understand.
you know someone's a bit of an a-hole, right? You you're not gonna necessarily approach them on your own, because you know they're about smoke. So you're gonna have your team on side to go in, or someone with you, like, hey, I need support, just buy me. So that is how you would work with them. But there is a lot of emphasis in making sure that you are having to work with them as well as your elevated ancestors. There's just so much in common with the Odinani here as well. You do have your elemental ancestors. It is understood it's an animist practice. So animism being this idea that spirit is in everything. The elements are your ancestors. So you're working with them. You're working with the spirits. You're working with them in this practice. But yeah, it's your ancestors. You are having to call them on board as you're working with these malevolent ancestors. And in terms of your day-to-day ancestors, because I think you mentioned that with the Odinani as well, I was getting so many chills with how, like,
similarity.
We're told to work with all ancestors, including our, like, day-to-day. So they may not be elevated, but they know you're going to a specific ancestor for a specific thing. So in the real world, you're not going to your broke cousin asking them for money. They don't know a thing about money. Why are you going to them? I started, it's a bit of an aside, I started learning Brazilian Portuguese because I'm so determined to go to Salvador in Brazil. It's the blackest town in South America, and they have a Iemanjá festival, 2nd of February. So I thought, I'm going to learn Portuguese. The money's going to come somehow. Didn't come, whatever. But I have a great-grandfather who, after the slave trade, moved from Madeira into Antigua. And when I started learning Portuguese, I'm like, oh, I'm wondering if this is a guy who moved over, literally stole over on a banana boat, literally a banana boat, somehow ended up with 170, almost 200 acres of land, which is still in the family today. They're fighting over it. We'll forget about that.
Always fighting over land.
He ended up with a mass amount of land, so he knew how to get money. So I thought, oh, I know this Portuguese now. So the first night that I start doing these invocations in Portuguese, bam, next day, a grand job to help me pay my rent. And it's just like, okay, interesting. And that's just because I was speaking to him before in English, but doing that then in Portuguese, it like kicked it up to the next level, and it really solidified the understanding, my initiation. It's like you're going to the right ancestor for the right thing.
Oh my God. Like confirmation, like I'm on the right track.
It was nuts. I mean, I know this stuff is so real, but every time something like this happens, I'm still like, whoa, the universe is so odd. It's just how.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, love. And another question for you. Let's say if someone who does not have a Caribbean background, right? Could they practice Obeah? And why? If not, why not? And no, let's leave it like that. I'll just ask that. So someone who wants to practice this, but they don't have the background, they don't have the ancestors to practice. Like, let's say me, I'm Kenyan. If I wanted to practice, I was fascinated.
Are you asking me specifically if they can or if they should? Because automatically, I'm thinking wherever your ancestor, this idea of a thread, right? You're talking to an ancestor. Actually, you get to God, Nyame. You get to the highest, right? Why wouldn't you just like use your own direct phone line to that. I don't know why you wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are you going around the houses? You can absolutely learn the rituals. You can absolutely find someone who will initiate you in the practices. But what are you doing? This is more than, I mean, everything is spiritual. I wouldn't say it's more than spiritual. It's epigenetic. It physically lives in our fiber, in our being. When we do this work, we are activating. We are activating that line. So, like, it's odd to me. I would say find things within your lineage and try and connect around those things, because that is going to be a direct line. You're less of an enthusiast then and more of someone who's actually learning and embodying these things, you know.
That's such a good one, because that's the hot topic right now from what I've seen on socials. I've seen some people who are hoodoo, they practice hoodoo, but then they also practice Ifa. And then I know some people who practice Kemetic spirituality, but then they also practice like Congo cosmology and so on. So it's kind of like they're kind of mixing a lot of these traditions as well. I see your hand. I see your hand up, Fenyx. But if anyone could speak to that as well, like, what do you think about the mixing and matching of different African traditions? Is it advised, or should we stay away from that?
I can answer
yes
as well. Practicing Lucumi, I have Orisha in my house.
Okay.
I have had Orisha in my home for years now. And as a child of Obatala, preparing for Ocha, which is crowning for us, I'm going to say with my whole chest, absolutely not. My Palo, my Palo is separate from my Orisha. My Orisha is separate from my root work and conjure. Like, none of those things mix. Some of those things aren't even in the same space together because they don't. It's not even a wise idea to have them in the same sphere. So to do the mashup, to me, is a direct disrespect to the very lineage, practices, and ancestors you claim you want to respect and honor.
Wow. Okay. Fair enough. Does anyone disagree? Go ahead, love.
Okay, so hear me out. The only reason I disagree with this is because Obeah, the Obeah we have in the Caribbean, is heavily syncretized almost. So, like I was saying, there's aspects of Odinani in it. There are aspects of Orisha worship in it. It literally depends on the sect you go to, because so many people from different cultures were literally thrown into a pot together and have, so many different points of DNA and culture that all really has formed the Caribbean form of this practice. And that really does that pisses some people off, like, to no end. And I completely understand what it was. But from an Obeah perspective, it was a matter of survival. And it wouldn't have survived if, say, my ancestors weren't working with the Taino and Arawak and understanding how the spirits of that land work with their plants and their spirits, and how people from Ghana would have worked, and then Igbo people would have worked together, bringing their things together. Literally, it became a matter of survival in the Caribbean. And I think it's really important, for me at least, to acknowledge that has formed as a matter of that survival.
Fair enough.
I'd like to say a few words to that too. It was something early on in my spiritual practice, diving into my understanding of my roots a little bit more. Before initiation, I heard a lot of people with the perspective of a purist. Within Haitian Vodou, there's a lot of syncretism. It's very much like what Love described. However, in Haiti, you do have a purist tradition. Now, the purist traditions within Haitian Vodou can sometimes be African, but they can also be indigenous. When they are indigenous, people who are very Pan-African hate it because it's very Amerindian magic, it's very shamanistic, it's a lot of animism. And quite frankly, the Ginen tradition is very American indigenous. It's very Taino, it's very Arawak. For me, it has been a lot. Quite frankly, one of probably the most unspoken parts of indigenous spiritual practices that are in the African diaspora is probably the bits that have to do with how we weave together the European, the Amerindian, and the African. In Haiti, it is a real thing. We're not just dealing with people who have their spirituality or their magic or whatever they want to call it that particular day, to whatever end they're using it. There's so many different ways you can frame that. When you go to Haiti, I think of all the countries I've been to or cities I've traveled to, Haiti is probably the one place where it's common. People talk about werewolves and vampires and shapeshifters and blah, blah. Like, this is normal conversation. Now I think there are lots of kids who are like depressed, but issues like schizophrenia never existed in Haiti because everybody is trance. Everybody has spirits who are mounting them. There are lots of things that in the West are abnormal in Haitian culture. This is just Tuesday. Like, everybody's in touch with their spirits. Everybody's okay with being mounted with their spirits. So having sort of extrasensory experiences of life in your day-to-day, whether you know the spirits or not, the spirits know you. And they're not going to wait on your permission to ride you if that's what's going to save your life. Because your grandmother's prayers over you, your auntie's prayers over you, your mother's prayers over you, their protection over you, all the ritual baths you've been taking, never ask the question, why was I doing this? We do this every year. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many of those things that we don't question. But when you become an initiate, and I think this is the part that for me, even in the diaspora, I have a bigger problem with people who are unsanctioned initiators. I am less bothered by people who are not, who can't directly trace their lineage than by people who are saying that they carry a signature that they don't have the right to carry. I find that more harm is done that way. Because to some extent, I may not, like, for instance, my last name is Prophet. It's a quite common Caribbean last name. In Haiti, it's very, very common. In all parts of Haiti, you can run across people with that last name. Doing some research, random Google search, the first place where Prophet was recorded in history was in some random Scottish village of a man with the exact same name as my paternal grandfather, William Prophet. Now, if I didn't know, since I was like 12 or 13, talking to leaves and feeling like I knew Merlin, you know, and like King Arthur, like all of those things made sense to me. When I was having conversations with fairies in the garden at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and nobody in Haiti was like, hey, this is completely normal. They were like, what the hell is this girl on? Like, who's talking to fairies? Like, how do you know Jinn? You know what I mean? Like, so by the time I came of age, and I had lived in Asia, so yes, I understand snake people, and not necessarily that whole reptilian, oh, these people are sucking our blood. No, like people who are otherworldly, who have a DNA that's as old as this planet is. Those are snake people, where I know them from. As someone who lived in Cambodia, who's been near Angkor Wat, like, so when I think about my lineage, and when I think about, for instance, when I meet Vietnamese people and they don't like me, but they don't know why they don't like me, it's because I'm from Cambodia. And if you're not Asian, you wouldn't understand that. But it's also why when I meet Chinese people or Japanese people or Korean people, or even the fact that my brother is married to someone who's Korean, those things make sense to me. But it's also why, too, as a healer, even though there are lots of modalities outside of what sort of the conventional either Haitian Vodou or Ginen practitioners use, I've had to embody the fact that my way of understanding the world is new school for what we do, because I've had to be comfortable with being able to answer questions for my own kids that my grandparents couldn't answer. Questions about sexuality, questions about gender, questions about politics, questions about policy, questions about how you bridge the energy you can feel with a world around you that tells you you're only limited to your 5 senses. You know, like I have conversations with young people these days about dragon energy. I have conversations with these kids these days about Arcturians and star seeds. I have conversations with parents about neurodivergence, how you manage energy, how you regulate nervous systems. For me, understanding our spirituality is about translating this knowledge into practical technology for people. Like when you wake up in the morning and you have, you know, 3 or 4 kids in your household and everybody's a different elemental makeup, how do you work in that energy? So when I work with families, I do those kind of consults. So if you've got 5 different energy balances, you know, blended family, you still have to live together. Sometimes you're managing multiple time zones because you're co-parenting. Someone lives out of state. In my case, we're traveling across, you know, borders sometimes. So it's like in this world where things aren't necessarily always black and white, I think spirit too comes and asks us to be open, to transcend what was true yesteryear, especially if the kids are asking new questions. And especially if the times are demanding updates to the old answers. In the Haitian Vodou tradition, because so much of what gave us our emancipation has been perverted and even kept a secret from us, even in Haiti. For me, the work is about self-discovery, but it's about mass self-discovery. It's about initiating people to themselves. I honestly, unless someone is willing to be initiated, I usually cannot work with them at my level, just because by the time my initiation was complete, I realized it was an BaNAuset initiation. It was soul work initiation. We talk about zombification in Haiti. Everybody knows in Haiti, like we got that sauce. But no one really talks about what it actually is. It's magic every Haitian uses on each other. It will make you go crazy at the mildest form. It's just a very potent projection. And every layer of magic you add on top of it just adds another layer of complexity to it. So by the time someone comes to work with me, and I don't want to take you down to the hellhole that I had to learn how to climb out of, I've got to be able to work with some energies that can help you see clearly, can help you declutter your path out. But the kids that are being born today are showing me it's not up to us to do the work for people anymore. They have to be able and be willing to do the work themselves, and we are there to facilitate that journey for them and help them guide themselves through it. But everybody here, as far as I can tell, we all went to hell and back. And part of what I think has empowered each of us to come together today is in recognition that, yes, this is not happy-go-lucky work. This is not about like, you know, oh my God, positive thinking. Oh my God, love and light. Oh my God. But when you have somebody in front of you who granddaddy was a rapist, daddy was a drug dealer, their daddy, you know, like baby dad number 1 has beat them, baby dad number 2 ran out of, like, it's just stuff on top of stuff on top of stuff. And in my particular case, I couldn't begin to tell y'all, we don't have enough time. But I do want to make sure we make it known for people. This is not about material gains. It's not about, you know, your twin flame. It's not about manifesting millions overnight, you know, like it's not about any of those things, even though I can say every step of the process, you do get those gifts. Like everyone here, I'm sure, has had their money manifestation journey, like where you lost everything and the everything after everything. You know what I mean? But I also know too, like we've all had to lose family, remake family, restructure family, and but also within ourselves. So I come from a tradition that there's so much harm that happens to us when we make our spirituality known to the outside world. That my tradition, we've always been scared to really talk about it. And so even me being an initiate of the Ginen tradition, as opposed to being a mambo, which is a priestess of the Vodou tradition, that was something my own ancestors chose for me. And I now can understand why that was a direct result of my lineage, because in my laku, which is how you talk about your ancestral homeland, in my laku, it was always in the dream time. That's how we did our initiations. That's how we did our work. That's how we did our training. It was never in the wake, like in the awake state. So before I even knew what initiation was, I had already had the dream. By the time I started to wonder what initiation was, started talking to different priests about it, they saw so much light in me that was different from their light, that my ancestors chose, this is not the path for you. You know where they sent me instead? They sent me to Freemasonry.
Oh.
And I became a daughter of Isis. So the lone all-woman lodge in Haiti is the daughter of Isis. And yeah, I'm an initiate of that lodge. And as an initiate of that lodge, let me tell you, the only thing that comes close to what I am now discovering is what it must feel like to be part of the Justice Council on an Indian reservation. It is outside of human law systems. I don't know how to describe it. It is something completely different. So everything that I thought, at least, that I knew and I understood about how we manage the intersection between the material and the invisible world. What I'm learning about being a shaman of the Haitian Ginen tradition is that it's not enough to understand the forces of light. You have to be strong to be able to work with the forces of the dark, not because you're there to placate them, appease them, but because you understand the cosmic purpose that they serve, and that you have the authority and you have the backup too, to be able to manage that energy, but also to transmute it for the community. And I have to tell you, being from Haiti, this is perhaps the most unspoken part, is you can't pick between the good and the bad ones, unfortunately, because for 234 years, there's been no choice. All of our founding fathers were also killers and murderers, as much as they were freedom fighters. Our mothers, they whooped our behinds within an inch of our lives, just to save our lives. So the amount of pain that's in our ancestry and our lineage, I'll be quite honest with you, I don't know very many Haitian initiates who have a choice. You have to learn to do your best to alchemize the energy and to transmute it, because that's the way. There is no other way. We don't have any other choices. This is our ancestry. These are our ancestors, and this is what we have to work with. And so someone like me shows up. People like me come because we can't deal with the superstition anymore. We have to bridge the well, why did it rain today and not yesterday? Why did things fall apart today and they didn't fall apart last year? You know, we all look at the stars, we all talk to the spirits, we all talk to the orishas, but who is directing our lives in a harmonious way? And I think for me, the communal is where I'm starting to see the real difference between the initiates and the non-initiates, because everybody can label themselves whatever they want to, But at the end of the day, when you are an initiate, there's a way that you walk with your yin and yang that I think it just speaks for itself.
You know what, Phoenix, that pertains to the to BaNAuset's point as well, and also Yayi's point too, like mixing traditions with no initiations and not working with spirits that you're not familiar with too. So the basic point here is that, you know, we need to be familiar, and initiation is key for most.
And having a guide is key. I think that's one of the things too. When we have societies and cultures that are like barely surviving without elders, the median age in Haiti is pretty low. So while we are a Black African diaspora nation, a lot of the traditions, history did not make it possible to preserve them. So we want to respect the elders. We say that we do, but there aren't that many left, or we're not around them. So from that perspective, even when we make communal decisions, it's not with the gravitas of when grandma used to make it, because grandma used to make it in sync with the stars. She knew when the new moon, she knew how to time things. You understand what I'm saying? Like, there's knowledge of the seasons. And so a lot of the work that I'm actually doing now is around timing, because a lot of people know how to align, but they don't understand timing. And so as an astrologer, but also too as somebody who's having fun traveling with like a lot of my ancestors through the deserts, working with Syrian star systems and stuff, for instance, like there's a lot of things you can know. And when you know those things and you're able to apply them in a way that works with your energetic signature, like I think that's where African spirituality in the modern era, I think that's really where the promise is. It's like, we have all of these tools, let's bring them all together so that we're not just aligned, but that we're attuned to our own timing too, so that things can, you know, flow better for us.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Fiona. You said a word. You really did. And just a few comments from Love. So you said initiation is important. I still think it is sensible to have a cultural DNA link. And then Yayi is saying, when we say invitations for my line, that means you're being taught at the feet of elders. And Noentla, we can evolve, but the fundamentals must stay intact. Very interesting, ladies. And I'm so sorry to rush you. I know I could go on, but I know it's getting late from where you are as well. I'm here in Vancouver, Canada, and it's like almost 4:30 p.m. So it's still a little early for me, but I know it's getting late for all of you, most of you. So let's go. I think Juno, did you have something to say? I saw your hand was raised. But let me know, Juno, if you wanted to add on.
Okay. All right. Excuse me. I have my camera. Yeah, I'm situated close to the road. No. When it comes to, I guess, blending the traditions, especially where I'm from, I know there are a lot of closed practices, so I can't really speak on them specifically. But our history has a lot of Yoruba, Igbo people, Haitians, and any other mixtures. Right now, we have a lot of Cubans here, and that's how I've been initiated into Lucumi. And after learning that they do blend the Catholicism, you know, Santeria with the saints and the Orishas, it was interesting because I grew up Catholic. I do think a lot of our walks of life leads us to where we really need to be. So even though Catholicism didn't quite sit with me, it was the foundation to understand Lucumi. But in this day and age where I guess it's more open, we don't need to syncretize the saints with the Orishas anymore, because that was an act of survival. It's just, I find it interesting that those cultures are still ingrained. So, for example, we do have the practice of Obeah. Is that how you pronounce it? But we say it Obeah. We say it like, I think that's from ignorance, or that's just our accent in general. But that is a practice that isn't necessarily welcomed, but it is tradition. And I do remember getting a reading one of my first Ifa readings that one of my family members, like my grandmother, practiced Ifa, or it was something related to it. So I know it wasn't something that she specifically practiced, like specifically Ifa. It could have been some sort of version of Obeah or even Hoodoo, because we're also connected to the Gullah Geechee people, as I've also, with my research, where we even have a similar accent. So, like, I feel there's a lot of traditions that have been either accidentally mixed. So it's almost hard to even differentiate at this point what is specifically Ifa, what is specifically Hoodoo, what is specifically Obeah. So I know there are practices where you can't dabble, you can't talk to Eshu with tarot cards and stuff like that. So there's fixed things that you can do, cannot do. But you are, if you are someone who's exploring spirituality, I think it doesn't hurt to learn about these things. Like, for example, I'm interested in astrology, I'm interested in tarot, but I understand that it has nothing to do with Ifa, and that's not something that needs to be blended. So I think it's important to just respect the traditions as they are. It's important to learn and understand how they are connected, but also knowing that certain things are closed for a reason. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
That's a really good point. And I'm still stuck on you can't talk to Eshu with tarot cards.
Right. And so yeah.
So why is that? So, well, you explained why, right? Tarot cards are a product of, I guess, more Western New Age. Would that be correct, or no? Do we have tarot cards or some form of card divination?
I think in Lucumi they have a specific type of cards that they read. Because I was working with a Santera at one point. She, like, I don't know what they call it, I can't remember, but it isn't the European version of tarot. Like, they have similar cards and they have like similar meanings, but I wouldn't know the name of it. But they do use cards, like, say, I guess either for misas or stuff like that. But tarot is definitely completely different.
Yeah, you can use cards if you want tarot. But even if I was in a Misa Blanca or a Misa of any sort, I wouldn't. My spirits don't necessarily need it in a Misa. Like, the odds of me having anything on me other than a cigar and a bell is probably going to be very slim. That's probably all I'm going to have, and the bells are around my feet.
Okay. Right.
So as far as Lucumi, you can't. There's nothing we can do or that would involve tarot cards unless we're giving a general reading. We can do that. We can use tarot cards, playing cards, same as any root worker, conjurer, anyone. But if it relates to actual Lucumi practice, when we're talking to an Orisha, we're throwing coconuts. We're throwing coconuts. And if we're talking to an Mpungo, we're throwing chamalongos. So, yeah, we're not throwing down tarot.
Even Love is saying shells, right? I know carry shells as well, right? Yeah, that makes sense. The tools that we use.
I've seen diviners in Haitian Vodou use regular playing cards. A lot of the younger practitioners and younger priests and priestesses, they're comfortable with using different tools, but it's not usually within the Haitian Vodou tradition. Even if they're still authentic in their ability or in their practice. In the Haitian Vodou tradition, typically we only really use natural things. So, and by natural, I mean things that are indigenous in the Haitian environment, right? So when you're in the diaspora, obviously your practice is going to continue. You're going to make adaptations to it. And I think that's where people like me, we're helping a lot of people find their bridge back home to their traditions, because yes, you can use tarot, but it is a different language. It is a different language than the ones that your ancestors have been using for however many generations. You are in your Haitian lineage in your spirituality, right? So from that perspective, I think, yes, we can make them work within our practices if we're fluid. But I think, like everybody else is saying, I agree that you have to still respect the tradition. Because if you, for instance, if you don't know the Rider-Waite Tarot, for instance, and you just attempt off of the strength of you understand the tarot deck that you're now using by someone who just created it, but yet you don't know the lineage of the tarot with the 22 paths, you don't know the connection to the Kabbalistic tree of life, you don't know the Jewish deities or the egregores that are being honored in that divination, and yet you're using it in the Haitian tradition. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm simply saying that if you find somebody with a more sophisticated toolkit, they're gonna blow your work to shit. I mean, excuse my French. It's not gonna land, because you won't be able to make the direct connections that you should have been able to make if you had been able to develop yourself within your tradition first. The other thing I'll say is that in the diaspora, there are lots of bridge sort of sects. So in the New Orleans region, for lack of a better word, there's swamp magic, there's hoodoo, there's voodoo, there's New Orleans hoodoo, New Orleans voodoo, and there's also all of the traditions that the people who now have migrated to New Orleans, that they bring with them, that they find New Orleans to be a safe place for. So I've run into that where, like, for instance, the New Orleans tarot is something that a lot of people of Haitian ancestry in the United States, they've been using that. There's nothing wrong with using that, but if you don't have a connection to Marie Laveau, if you've never been to Mississippi, if you don't know the Bayou, if you don't know, like, there's just uniquely American things that are attached to that tradition, that unless you traveled to, like, Gullah land, like, do you even know where in the Americas you are indigenous to? You know, as a Haitian person, I think that as a Haitian person, sometimes we can feel our connection to all of the traditions. It goes back to, I think, what Data was saying about the lived memory and how much of that you can, what your capacity is for awakening that energy within you. I happen to know that the more of that energy you can awaken in you, the more polyvalent it makes you, the more of a polymath it makes you. The minute you get into that spectrum of existence or of expression, it reorganizes so much of your life and of your practice that I can't think of a better word. But it sort of makes you want to transcend those kinds of boundaries, you know, to get to the heart and the core of what's actually going to heal us all, you know, because at the end of the day, while I may love how Haitian I am and feel very proud of that, I now live in Toronto. And I'm a US citizen. So there's no part of me that sees what I do as a uniquely Haitian experiment. Earlier this year, I was in Turks and Caicos with a lot of people that share a lot of what Juno, I think, shared as background. So it's like, my brother is from Bahamas. He grew up in Marsh Harbor. Until I went to Provo this year, I really didn't understand what that was like. But now I do. Because the harshness of Haiti is very different from the harshness of Bahamas, is very different from the harshness of Ivory Coast, for instance, you know, or the harshness of Chicago. But yet each of those places produces its own sort of like survival technology for all of us. And I think I'm at the point now where I'm like, okay, I've accepted that this helps us survive, but like, I want to decode what helps us thrive. Like, that's where I am. Like, I want to decode, like, how do we, if I want to not feel caught up in my karma, because I can hold the weight of my grandfather as he was in my body. I can hold the weight of my grandmother as she was in my body. I can frame those stories in ways that empower me. For me, that's the technology I'm looking for, where I can say to someone, you know, invest your time. Like, not everybody's going to be okay with organic growth. Some of us are type A, and we need that precision. We don't want any of those things. And I think the same way that our ancestors, there are different archetypes for different days, different hours of the day, and so on and so forth. That level of precision, I think, is what our kids who are suffering from being overly medicated, who are suffering from not enough attention and not enough connection and not enough community, like this is where I think we begin to answer their questions, because they won't all be able to go back home. They won't all be able to know directly their ancestors. They won't all even be able to understand fully their cosmology. But they're all beings of light, and all of them are impacted by how strong our light is. So I know I said a lot I didn't expect to, but it really, yeah, you all have really reminded me how important and how beautiful being on this journey is. So that's all for me. Until next time, because I don't want to talk anymore. I'll never
I'm
stop.
going to remember that, from survival to thriving. Yeah. Okay, let's go to Ola. Let's say our last few responses, and then we can finish up. Okay, so Ola.
I can speak. I'm a continental African, so having lived in the US and then in Puerto Rico for 10 years, the Caribbean, and now back home in Kenya, my maternal home, or Africa. I can only speak from that perspective, and I understand the survival of our traditions in the diaspora. However, my whole life has been a life of blends as well, because my father is Nigerian, my mother is Kenyan, and my Kenyan mother is actually half Maasai and half Luya. And when I was in Puerto Rico, I was adopted in the Taino tradition as an initiated as a Tekina. So, so I can speak from a perspective of that ancestral walk versus choosing, just not knowing where where the spiritual call is coming from. Like, I know exactly where it's coming from, right? Because of that connection, close connection. And I have been trained in all. I live on Maasai land right now, and I do a ceremony here as well. For me, not blend any of the traditions. If I'm working with Maasai medicine. If I'm working with Ifa, it's Ifa. When I worked in Taino tradition in Puerto Rico as a tequila, as a ceremonialist, I did not bring Ifa there. However, to prepare for ceremony or to prepare for community gatherings, I always called on to all my ancestors because they're all part of who I am. So I think what African Crystal and everyone has been saying is that, and love too, I think that both are can be merged, but also both be separated depending on the circumstances that you need them. So I just wanted to offer that perspective because I know that's a unique background, and the question is, should they be blended or should they not? It does not need to be it's up to the individual's reception to the spirituality. Some people don't feel very connected to a specific ancestral line, and that's fine too. Anyway, so it's been a pleasure hearing everyone here. It's almost 3 o'clock in the morning, so it's which is a together and talk about these topics.
Thank you so much for staying up until 3 o'clock. My goodness, thank you.
Yeah, it's 2:40 right now. So I will log off, but I also want to say that we do divinations, especially let's say in the Ifa tradition, with what's called an opele, which is actually a divining chain. And this chain is actually a ladder that was given to us from Orun, from heaven, when the Irmole gave us divine teachers, Orumila, when he came down from the higher realms, he used this chain as a ladder to climb down. And so this is traditionally what speaking of Ifa, not in the diasporic way, but traditionally in Ile Ife at least, this is what is traditionally used for divination, and kola nut. So kola nut, I think I heard someone say we use nature products. This is one of it, and the opele, the divining chain. And so from that, then you read all the divination praises or poems, and you as an initiate, I am an initiate, Iyanifa, so I'm a priestess. You have learned how to interpret the different poems that you read. And that's how we do it traditionally in Ifa from Ifa.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ola. And we'll definitely put all your links below for everyone so that people know where to find you and access you and your services too. Thank you, Ola, and get some sleep.
All right. Odinani, take care. Blessings to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, Noentla, I'm so sorry. There were 8 people. We're down to a few, but Noentla, go ahead and say, oh, sorry, no, before Noentla, before you, sorry, BaNAuset.
Yeah, so I wanted to speak to the point that I made before, that it can actually be very dangerous to work with spirits who you do not know, who you are either not called to work with, or you're not connected to by bloodline. So I think it's very interesting to learn about everybody's tradition here, even the Obeah tradition, which I would think, or maybe somebody would think, because, for example, with me being of a Jamaican background, my family is Jamaican, that maybe that would be what I was called to work with. I have never been interested or called or felt that I needed to work with Obeah as a tradition. Never, and still don't. Not saying that I wouldn't if that came to me, but it has not come to me, and there are other traditions that I hear about, and they're so interesting to me, but the spirits call you to work with them. And I know by the way that I was guided to the Kemetic tradition that this is like a part of, in our tradition, we use the term Yayi to describe destiny, because you can kind of see points over your life where it's almost like they're dropping little hints of what's to come. And you find it, you look back into your life that, oh my goodness, these have been following me for a long time. These spirits have been following me. They've been watching me, and they've been guiding me to them. So yeah, that's the point that I wanted to make. It's very dangerous to go into things that have nothing to do with you. Nobody called you, nobody asked you to show up. You're not connected to these spirits at all, and you just want to go into it. You can't. It's just kind of like with human beings. Spirits are no different. We are having a human experience. You can't go into situations with human beings who you don't know. You don't know how they move. You don't know how they operate. You don't know how they think. You have to have a familiarity with these spirits before you work with them, and take your time. And there's also this thing that I hear a lot about, self-initiating, which I don't agree with, and for this exact reason. You make a lot of mistakes along the way, and some of those mistakes can be very detrimental. That is the point of initiation under an elder, a trained elder, priestess, priest who can guide you through these things. There are a lot of people who end up going through spiritual psychosis because they practice things that they don't know, they don't understand. I've heard young people, 20 years old, with no guide, talking about, I'm high priestess. You can't do that, and then they run back to Jesus after that. Once they get scared, they run right back to Jesus. So when I tried that African spirituality, it didn't work out well. Then they go running because you're playing with stuff that it's not for you. You know what I mean? And you didn't have the right guidance. So it's important to have guidance, and also don't go where you're not called.
And then also, BaNausset, like you said, you know, to learn along the way. Would that mean experimentation as well? Does that involve experimentation? Like if someone wanted to explore, you know, this practice and that practice just to feel what's right for them, is that a part of the process, or are there other ways to know what works for us?
The best way is to learn first. Learn and study. And another part that I want to add in is that you must practice African spirituality in conjunction with African history. Otherwise, you're really doing, you know, you're doing foolishness. You cannot practice African spirituality without understanding the history. The history is going to really give you information about who those spirits are, and it's going to give you a solid foundation for your spiritual practice. That's another danger that people go into, trying to do, you know, these spiritual things because they think it's cool. And that's something I can tell a lot of people who run away from spirituality, particularly African spirituality. They run away because they never got the history piece. They just start dibbling and dabbling and practicing. And you can't do it that way.
So it's like that's something I've always said. You have to be kind of a historian on this journey. You have to read, you have to have mentors, you have to know the past in order to create this future for yourself within this paradigm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you, BaNausset. And then Noentla, let's get to you.
Of course. Oh wow, what a session. A couple of points. I'm going to start with the mixing of traditions. So I'd like to first give a background on myself. I am South African, but I'm also, like, on my dad's side, on my paternal side, I am Zulu, and I am Zigua from Tanzania. And then on my mother's side, my maternal side, I am Swati, which is a landlocked country within South Africa, and I am, lack of a better word, Tsonga, which is like north east in South Africa, the South African region. So with having, I've grown up predominantly in the southern region of Africa, but I've traveled a little bit, you know, and with having such a different culture within my lineages, my ancestors took me to the Mbondo land in the Eastern Cape, which is none of my lineage practice, and I found there that the Mbondo tradition, actually, the way that they practice the healing welcomes all traditions. So I was trained by a white man who then trained other people from different parts of the world on different continents. So my spiritual family, there's like an Asian lady, there's people from Germany, there's an English lady, some Americans, white people, and Black people all mixed in the lineage. And this is when I learned that spirituality, particularly African spirituality, is a conduit for healing and decolonization. That's when I really started to really understand being decolonized. And in fact, I learned more about being Black because I grew up, in the city and private schools and all of that, and we didn't really talk about African spirituality. The Sangomas were people that lived in the forest that no one ever saw, and I was in a very Christian family, grew up Catholic and kind of New Age Christianity. I went to an Anglican school, an Anglican all-girls school. So I've had all of these influences, but when I did my training at 24, I had to unlearn the indoctrination. I had to unlearn a lot of things. So, and then I learned how to bridging. And then once I was done with my training, which then I'll touch on the tools, because as a Xhosa, in the Mpondo tradition, we don't actually use any tools. When you learn how to divine, you use your sticks that you carry around, and you stamp on the ground, and you learn how to connect directly to source. So my tradition, my practice in using bones, in using cards, and using candles only came after I was done with my initiation. It happened in a natural way when I was now in my strength as a healer, and I was now dabbling and experimenting with the different tools and fine-tuning my gift. And then that's when I was fine-tuning this gift, that's when I was then called upon different deities by Mami Water, Oshun, Yamaja, and I didn't even know what was going on. But I was already in my strength as a healer, so I could connect deeper, and I could take that, that journey as a self-initiate, for lack of a better word, but I was already initiated. But I did, even though I was initiated, I did still need the help and the guidance of other elders and colleagues and friends that were Sangomas that had walked the journey before me. So I think just by me sharing my story, we speak on the importance of doing this with guidance. We speak on the importance of the fundamentals of initiation, because it's a rite of passage. You cannot be a Sangoma if I haven't slaughtered. We go through a very vigorous processes. You start by learning how to slaughter a chicken, and then you slaughter a goat, and then finally you learn how to slaughter a cow. So if you haven't done those steps, you cannot be a Sangoma. So I say, like, cool, you can be a self-initiate, but you're not the word. You're not the tradition. You're not. That means that you are in harnessing your spiritual gifts. You're connecting to your ancestors, but you are not a shaman, because shamans are initiated. They go through rites of passage. There's secrecy. Now there's so much information that I don't initiate. I actually would prefer not to, because of just the state of the new generation, because people come to you with so much information and they want to tell you how to do them. They're not willing to be on their knees anymore. And when we ask for people to be on their knees, they call it abuse in this day and age. But when we initiated, I couldn't speak to my healer standing up. I had to look on the floor and be on my knees the whole time. I was on my knees for 4 years.
Wow.
So, and you only, as you graduate, then you stand up, because it has to be the death of ego. So now we are still bringing our egos into the initiatory path. And that's when I say the fundamentals have to be intact, because those processes and things were put in place because that was the time that you were taking isolation to connect. Because when you're initiating, you're no longer a person, and you're not spirit yet. You're in that in-between phase, which we call Nkwita, you know. So I think, yeah, everything that you guys have said, I think there's a time and place, because yes, I've been able to mix traditions, but that's also because my lineage is so vast. But at the same time, I was already initiated. I was already in my power, and I already knew the different depths of medicine. So I knew how not to push myself too far. Because when you're working with the higher ascended spirits, you're gonna get pushed beyond your limit. Yeah. So that is my 2 cents, and I thank you so much, Sasha, for bringing us together. I really hope that we are able to do this more often, because there's so much knowledge to be shared. And yeah, you guys are also inspiring, and I think I've even received some gems on my current journey and my current initiations that I've learned so much today. Thank you so much, Makos.
Makosi, thank you so much, Noentla. Honestly, this was amazing. And I know it's late at where you are as well, so also feel free to bow out when you're ready. But thank you so much. And I do have so many questions for you, but in terms of what you just said, but hopefully we can do this again.
No, you can go ahead. You can ask me a question or two.
Okay, well, let me focus on one. I know for the other ladies, so I don't hold up the time. You mentioned that in terms of the Sangomas, right? There's a variety of different races and so on. There are white ones and all of that. When I was starting this journey a few years ago, well, I'd say the social media journey of learning more about this and also teaching this, you know, I wanted to seek out a Sangoma who could, you know, help me teach my followers and people just to learn a little bit more. And all I saw on my Google search was white man, white woman, and so on listed. And I was really confused. At first I was like offended, but I'm like, is it my place to be offended by this, you know? But it's just interesting to hear what you had to say about that and how it's normal, right? It's normalized and it's okay and acceptable for that.
I don't think it's normal. I don't think, no, I think it's normal to me because I was taught by a white Sangoma. I think it's something that our country is still getting used to. People are still quite offended by it. My teachers, they taught, you know, initiated in the 90s when it was still kind of forbidden for people to mix. So they were quite purist and they wanted to continue and do things right. So he even kept a remote village homestead in the village that his trainees could go to, so that the medicine wasn't diluted, so that the people of the community could teach the students. But what's happening now, and I would say, is that people are, I mean, I don't want to, you know, become too pedantic about race or whatever, but it is getting diluted. And it is now kind of a trend where people are using it as a meal ticket, or they are failing in their own traditions. So this is the easiest thing, or they're not even going into training and just buying the regalia and cloths. So even when you're on social media, you need to be careful and do your due diligence about who you're speaking to, because people are just putting on regalia and cloths and learning from YouTube and regurgitating information. And so I wouldn't say it's normal, no. I speak on it because I had first-hand experience, and I was very lucky to be with ethical people, and people that were called and lived this journey for what it was, and they didn't try to own it or They didn't try to colonize it. It was, like I said, I learned even how to be even more of a Black person and I appreciate my Blackness and my Africanness in that environment. But it's because he wasn't standing by himself. He had the entire village with him. And it was a very safe environment. So I mean, I think we, like my spiritual family, we have 50-50. Like there's people that are really with us, and then there's people that are like, hell no. So
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of like using your discernment kind of thing, but also it's a good thing that, you know, this white Sangoma was incorporating community of the indigenous people within that as well. So it wasn't just a solo effort, right? So okay, fair enough. Thank you, Noentla. And love.
It was a really speedy aside, actually.
Yeah.
Just because of a plant medicine ceremony I worked with. It was a comment about people running back to Jesus. I really want to advocate, I don't want to go into Jesus talk here, I really want to advocate for the fact that it's running back to Christianity. It's not running back to Jesus, who was a brown tradesman, who was an Essene. He was in a sect of Judaism that incorporated Kabbalah. It was like a completely different thing. They were communists. I know you're pulling your face, I don't want to go into this, but I'm begging you, go onto my Instagram page and look at my pinned reel. It was such an interesting experience, and I've gone down such a rabbit hole. And I guess it comes back to this thing of mixing traditions. I'm not about to run back to Christianity or Jesus. I want to tell you this. I need you to know this. It's not going to happen. But it has really opened my eyes up in terms of how spirits come to us as archetypes of different things and teach us different lessons. Does that make sense? Like, I'm urging you, please do look at the story. I'd be happy to talk to you offline about this, just because it was just so mind-blowing to me. That's it.
Thank you for sharing. I'll share. You said it's a story highlight?
No, it's I've pinned it to my reels. So if you go onto the reels tab, I've pinned it. I tell the story. I maintain I'm still an Obeah woman. Jesus, in fact, told me, don't become a Christian. I'm not a Christian. It's like, it actually made me more cemented in my Obeah. It's just made me have a different understanding of how spirits come to us and like teach us different things.
Absolutely. That makes sense. Okay, I'll check it out. And maybe I can also put it when I do the editing. Maybe I can also put it there for everyone to see. Is that okay?
This is excellent.
Yeah.
I just loved it. I love that the last thing was not back to Jesus, because Jesus was an upstanding citizen.
No, but he needs like a fan club. He's already got enough people like preaching him wrongly, but still preaching for him.
You will not find somebody who loves Jesus more than I do. Like, literally, Christ consciousness. Okay, I went to Asia. My son at the time had the Bantu knots in his hair. He was like 4 or 5 years old. Everywhere we went, they called him Isa. Everywhere we went. And we traveled throughout the region for about a year. And so, like, I mean, it was funny, but it's also serious. I think that's why Jesus is so wrapped into our diasporic tradition so much. Even though I think a lot of us have to unlearn some of the stuff, the church stuff, but I don't think any of us can get away from what Christ consciousness represents and how much that is definitely one of those layers as you try to break through or decode what, the web that makes us follow us. So yeah, this is interesting stuff. Thank you so much for organizing this, Sasha. I haven't had this much fun in a long time.
I saw BaNAuset shaking her head. Did you want to add a little something?
I think that the fact that we refuse to let go of this fictional white boy on a stick will be the death of us. And mixing it with our African spirituality is a waste of time. That's
Oh.
we need to let that go.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree with all of the vestiges of the white boy on the stick. Yeah, couldn't agree with that more.
I agree with you. But this, what I'm saying, is not that. It's not that at all, not even slightly. So please check it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, just from my opinion, I would say I'm a baby in all of this, still learning so much. But for me, I feel like, I also agree, with you, BaNaUset, as well, and also with what everyone has said. The only way that Jesus is real is through the collective minds of others. So many people believe in Jesus, and sorry, say that again.
And as an egregore.
Exactly, as an egregore. That's right. So through that, Jesus has become real, not necessarily to me, but to all of these collective minds and spirits that believe in that. So that's kind of how I see it too. Just definitely hanging a little bit in the middle of what everyone said. But again, there's no wrong, there's no definitive right in this. So I think this is a good natural end. And I do invite BaNaUset to do the Kemetic closing for this session, if she is okay with that. And then any last words as well afterwards, we can do that and then wrap up. Is that okay?
Yes, sure. First, I want to say thank you so much, Sasha, for inviting me to be here and for inviting such a diverse group of women in different sects of African traditional religion or African traditional spirituality to speak and give our experiences. Just thank you so much for putting this together.
Thank you so much for being here. Truly, I'm so honored to have all of you, truly.
So as we close out, we give thanks to all of the great, benevolent light beings for your presence here today. We thank you for helping us to facilitate this beautiful conversation. May you continue to go forth and ascend and rise in power. We give thanks for each and every one of us who are here today, who contributed to this conversation, and to everyone who is watching. Most importantly, thank you to Sasha for bringing us together today. May we all leave on a high vibration towards truth and higher consciousness. And so it is. Ashe, ashe, ashe.
And so it is.